Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and after slumping to 0-4, the Demons have kicked off their worst start to a season since 2012. It's frustrating, it's deflating, it's embarrassing, and frankly, it's not what any of us, even the most negative amongst us, ever expected. Joining me tonight to dissect another loss of the Cattery is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Binman. Good evening to all our listeners. Well, we're going to be all positive this week, I've decided. We're only 2 games off the 8. We're 4 games off top position. We're right in this. But I can also report that all pigs have been refueled, lined up and ready for takeoff.
So depressing. So also joining us tonight, maybe just one step closer to joining, well, at least me, on the dark side, is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. Normal transmission can resume for most of my Demon supporting career, so to speak. Tough game, but I thought there's some real positives, and I thought there's some real positives in the Casey game as well. So I know we'll get to that later. Just a bit of context is I can't remember what the odds were. I think did I mention it last week, but I think they were like $3.50 or something to win that game. We were $3.50 or close to $4 to win that game. And the reason I point that out, and they were $1.20, is that they're a much better team than us currently, and so the result in that context wasn't a major shock, was it? So, being realistic, we were always going to be pushing it uphill to win down at the category, even in the best of times. I think that's, if you think we're a basket case and we're in the game at 3/4 time, it sort of played out as we might have expected.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I was expecting a win this week. I think I'm just looking at the season as a whole because I didn't think we were going to win this game, and I think we played with a bit more heart than we've seen the last 2 weeks. But just the season as a whole and what it's looking like and what this season's shaping out to be is kind of depressing.
Yeah,
from what I expected,
I have to admit, there's a fair bit of recalibration going on at Shea Binman. So hope springs eternal, and eternal is carrying a fair bit of weight in that sentence. I wouldn't rule a line through the season yet, but it's obviously pretty tough to start 0-4, and I heard that as well, Andy. First time we've started 0-4 since 2012. Is that what you said?
That is correct, yep.
When Neild was coach back in the dark days. That was only a year. I think I started posting on Demonland in 2011, seemed a long time ago. And so I remember that era, not with fondness, but it was a dark period, wasn't it, during that time for Dees fans. So let's hope we're not going back there, and I don't think we are. So, I definitely don't think we're going back there.
Let's hope not. Well, let's do the housekeeping each week. I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we truly appreciate the feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we do give a well-deserved shout-out to those who do take the time to share those reviews with us. And Juv McVee writes, great pod. The Demonland podcast is my weekly source of thoughtful analysis and commentary on all things Melbourne Demons. I look forward to a new pod release each week, whether to bask in a glorious win or more recently to rage and moan over a poor performance. Recommend this pod to any Demon fans. Well, thanks for that. Juv McD, sorry, not Juv McVee, not Judd McVee, but Juv McD. I'm glad we can provide some much-needed therapy, but who is going to heal us? Keep that feedback coming. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we do give that shout out on the show. And if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you want to leave feedback or ask a question or a comment for the show, you can do so under our weekly podcast post, or just slide into our DMs. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the show. You can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And in addition, you can also watch and listen to us on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast and find our channel and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to connect with other passionate Dees fans, and if you haven't checked out our Demonland forum, head on over to demonland.com, sign up, join in the conversation with fellow Dees supporters from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free, and in addition to posting questions or comments for the show, you'll find endless discussions to moan and complain about all things demons. If you want to jump on the air tonight and have your say on any of the topics we're covering tonight, give us a call on our new phone number. It's a new one, so write it down, 0486 387 929. That's 0486 387 929. If you're on demonland.com, you will see it up on there as well. I'll answer, I'll put you on mute, bring you on when there's a break in the conversation. And you can also give that number a call during the week, leave us a message, and we'll play it out on the show. Our chat room is back. We're having slight difficulties with it. You'll see if you go in there. You can join us at demonland.com/podcast and be a part of the discussion in real time. And we do go live every Monday night at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. We're going to get straight into the match overview. Melbourne's 2025 season hit a new low on Friday night at Cardinia Park as they slumped to 0-4 for the first time, as we mentioned, in 13 years following a 39-point defeat to Geelong. And despite showing patches of spirit, the Demons were ultimately overrun by a Cats outfit that executed a precise and suffocating game plan. From the opening bounce, the Dees looked up for the contest but struggled to make meaningful impact on the scoreboard. Geelong's uncontested mark strategy picked the Demons apart and limited their ability to shift the game into their preferred contested style. The Cats racked up a record 148 uncontested marks and 165 total marks, the most Melbourne has conceded under Simon Goodwin. The Demons trailed by 15 points at quarter time and then narrowed the margin back to 15 points again before halftime, with their second quarter pressure forcing the Cats into brief hesitation. But despite those flickers of competitiveness, Melbourne couldn't sustain the intensity nor convert opportunities into scoreboard pressure, and they managed just 2 goals, 5 in the second half, as Geelong kicked 4 unanswered goals in the final term to seal the win. Max Gorm was serviceable in the ruck and worked hard, but was nullified at key moments by Reece Stanley, who kicked a goal and pushed forward to create problems. Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver and Jack Viney were rarely sighted together at centre bounces and failed to have their usual influence. The once dominant midfield trio no longer dictates terms like it once did, highlighting a concerning decline. Bailey Fritsch and Cozzy Pickett were wasteful, each registering 3 behinds. Pickett was lively and Melbourne's most dangerous midfielder at times, but his presence was missed inside 50, a recurring theme of robbing Peter to pay Paul, with neither role being filled adequately. Caleb Windsor and Cozzy's return to the side added some spark, but not enough polish. Melbourne's ball use and delivery inside 50 remains a critical weakness. Despite finishing with 1 more inside 50 entry than Geelong, they lack composure and skill execution going forward. The connection between midfield and forward line continues to be a major problem, with players often reacting rather than attacking with intent, and this disconnect has been apparent since mid-2023 with no signs of correction. The Dees' defensive pressure has declined dramatically, failing to register a tackle inside forward 50 in the opening quarter and conceding large uncontested possession numbers. Simon Goodwin acknowledged the team's effort but focused on poor execution, suggesting that we're getting high-quality entry, just poor execution. However, the issues run deeper than that. The lack of cohesion, composure and confidence is palpable. Goodwin urged his group to stay calm but get urgent, a message that rings hollow without visible system improvements. The Dees loss to Geelong makes it 5 wins now from the last 19 matches, the form line of a bottom 4 team. The midfield is no longer dominant, the defence is no longer miserly, and the forward line is chaotic and ineffective. Urgency is required not only in mindset but in game plan, personnel and execution. And while there were glimpses of spirit, especially during the second and third quarters, the final term fade out left the Demons fully exposed and outclassed by a Geelong side who executed their plan to perfection. Big man, you want to get onto the stats files and tell us how ugly it was?
Well, I was thinking of not bearing the lead and going straight to ugly this week, but I won't do that. It was interesting. I've looked at the questions, Andy, and I didn't see one about the tactics. So maybe we'll unpack that at some stage. But I thought that sort of whole conversation about the tactics.
There actually is. There's talk. The first question we've got up is Geelong's ball movement versus ours, and it does sort of touch on the tactic that they brought in. So yeah,
I mean, just briefly that he got whacked from pillar to post, Goodwin, for allowing them a free and so-called playing into their hands, and which I thought was a really curious criticism, seeing we're well and truly in the game. And just as an overarching sort of comment about my reflections on the game is that, to be honest, I wasn't that stressed afterwards, not like Suns. I thought we were in the game with Suns and it was sort of like we'd get a good handle on where we're at. And I watched the Suns-Crows game on the weekend and two teams running fast, on top of the ground, high quality. And so for me, that tactics it was a bit it wasn't so much of whether it was effective or not, but it was really about the message that it sent right from the beginning, is that we weren't going to be able to match the Cats and win that game unless we did something fairly radical. So it was more about, like I was saying before, about that realigning of my expectations. And he was playing in a way that, or coaching, it felt to me, in a way that I hadn't seen at the Dees since perhaps when Ruse was on board, when he was coaching to minimise losses. They even said it in the commentary, or at least on the Fox commentary. So that was more the feeling for me. And, I thought the criticism of that tactic was ridiculous, to be honest, because, as I said, we were right in the match. If we'd taken our chances in that third quarter, we should have been in front. We just completely fluffed our lines. That doesn't mean that we would have won the game, because, as we'll talk about later, we've increasingly got an evident problem of not being able to run our games. That seems obvious to me. But so I just thought that criticism was unfair of him. However, it did, for me, signal sort of an interesting approach. We weren't ready to roll our game plan against their game plan, that's for sure. And, we that whole uncontested mark stuff, we were allowing them to do that, partly, I think, because, it was minimising the damage on the scoreboard. While it's up there and chipping it around, they're not putting it through the big sticks. So, I thought that was a really interesting criticism of him, of Goody, and a bit unfair, because, he gets criticised for not doing things, not tagging or not trying things creative, and he does, and he gets a whack. So, and it certainly kept us in the game. It was relatively effective. So, starting off with this week's player ratings, and there's some interesting reading here, actually, in terms of where we're at. Our highest rated player on the ground was Christian Petrarca. He had a fantastic game, 20.6. I know we'll talk about his body language at the end of the game later, but just, it spoke to me of someone who's really frustrated. And there were some things in the game that I found really frustrating, in terms of, including him at one point not handing off to Tom McDonald, instead rolling back into trouble and getting tackled and giving up a goal. But he was our top-rated player, 20.6, and consistent right across. Get this, his second quarter, he had 10.2 player ratings, which is just enormous. And he was really trying to will himself into that game. He was awesome through the game. By far our highest-rated player, remembering 20.6 is considered an elite All-Australian level type game. Maxi came good again, though he down on his average. Just shows how good he is, though, 13.5. Stephen May, big credit to Stephen May. After I gave him a bake last week, he turned it around. He was awesome, wasn't he? He was just fantastic right through that match. I thought his effort and intensity was just terrific. We really missed Lever. I thought we really missed him coming across and being that third man in. But Stephen May was terrific for the entire match, consistent right through, 13.4. So those are the top three that it really drops away down to Ed Langdon was our fourth rated player. And here's one for all of the people who hate the player ratings and think they're overrated. And I'd make the point that, it's not the be and or. It's not everything, and you've got to look at it and combine other information. But this one jumped out at me. Our fifth rated player was Van Rooyen, Jacob Van Rooyen at 9.6, and the Daniel Turner came in at 6 and Tom McDonald 7. And we'll unpack a bit about Van Rooyen, but I was really frustrated with his performance. I have to say, he just wanted to get a wrestle. He just didn't seem to want to get any separation, and I think, his performance, not so much Daniel Turner's, but his forward performance was, really, he didn't provide any good leads. And, we really missed our opportunity to put some scoreboard pressure on in that third quarter when we had the momentum. Down the other end of the scale, Charlie Spargo certainly gives a bit of grist for the mill about Goody playing favourites. He had obviously did come onto the last quarter as sub, but didn't do anything really, particularly as a fresh player. He was negative 0.05 right at the bottom. Another player who's really concerning me at the moment, I know he got injured. He was second to last, was Harry Petty. It was not a great performance, really, and got outmarked a couple of times. And, I know that he also sort of looked like he got injured. Tommy Sparrow was the third last, and then Sharp, who is becoming a bit of a worry. And Jack Viney, we've talked a little bit about him, but he's, I think it's potentially time to explore other roles. Him maybe as a pressure forward. We're just not putting any pressure up forward. And Jack Viney, another subpar game, 3.1, which is really, that's below Henderson and it's below. So we had a lot of down players, I have to say. So on that, in terms of good, it was a bit of a struggle to find really good stats. Post-clearance, this is a bit of an anomaly, and I'll explain a little bit why in a sec, but our post-clearance, our hardball gets, we were actually +1 for hardball gets post-clearance. So that was about as good as it got in terms of finding good stats for us. Although this one, for all of the expected score lovers, this was really good. Our expected score was 46. And that's what we scored. So bang on. Well done, Melbourne. So it wasn't one of those games where our expected score, we scored 46 and our expected score was 113. It was bang on what we scored. So, well done for our accuracy there. Okay, so this is sort of, I couldn't really even get this into the good category, just an okay category. Our centre bounce, actually score source, we were +2 from centre bounce, believe it or not, but we only scored 8 points ourselves. They only scored 6 points from centre bounces. Stoppages, we were down 5, but that was padded out a little bit by they kicked 3-6 from stoppages to our 3-1. But so we're only down 3 for that match in terms of stoppage. So obviously it was better than the last couple of weeks. So okay. But it must be noted we brought an extra to the stoppage, which was really an unusual thing for us, that's what allowed them to have the extra behind the ball that the commentators were banging on about. Bad. So again, we're just getting smashed on turnover. So they scored 47 points from turnover. We could only score 19 points from this source, from turnover. Turnover is about execution, and obviously you give up balls when you missed easy targets, but it's really about the pressure you're applying on the person kicking the ball or handballing it. And that's what we used to be brilliant at, forcing the intercepts. And that was our game plan, was build on pressure and contest on the ball carrier, putting them under immense pressure and then dump kicking into our forward line. And we were turning it over. It's the same thing for creating turnovers. Still, contest and attack on the ball is never going to not be a fundamental part of footy. And, we can't be conceding 47 points from turnover. So 28 points down. That was the match, basically, right there. And so in some respects, we did all right. If we'd taken our chances a bit in that momentum, it wasn't really about inaccuracy. It was just our terrible kicking inside 50 and our lack of lead-up targets that we just, our forwards weren't leading up at all. So bad as well was our overall pressure. We've got to get this up to an acceptable level. We won't be winning any games of footy unless we can improve this. For the match, it was 166 to 181. So we're 15 down for the match. What I was really disappointed in was that first quarter. We were 163 to 180, and it was really evident with the eyes just down 17 in that first quarter. Given all that's gone on, given that we're down 0-3 coming into the game, and I'd expected more. It was terrific that second quarter we came out 184, but they matched our intensity and got that pressure rating up to 195. So we were down 11 in that quarter as well. We matched them 175 in the third quarter, which was our best quarter for the game. And so it's no surprise that our best quarter correlates with when we match them for pressure. Contested possessions down 12. Again, it doesn't matter what. There's a bit of, I think, overemphasis on fast, attractive football. But if you watch the Suns play, who played great footy, that was a great game of footy. And the Crows, they're still hard at it. They're still high pressure, high contest. They're not outside runners, and so contested footy is still where it's at. It's the number one stat in footy. We were down 12. Ground ball gets, we were down 9. This one is just, I'll speak to this actually, I'll leave this for the ugly one. Post clearance, ground ball gets, we were -6. Inside 50, loose ball gets, we just need to improve our inside 50 work in terms of the pressure. George talked about it last week. It was an issue again this week. We only won 7 loose ball gets when the ball is free and on the ground in our forward 50. They won 16 of those sorts of the loose ball gets, so we're down 9 for that. It just really highlights our lack of pressure up forward and our crummers and our inability to control those small, medium forwards that we've been struggling with even when we were going well. Points from defensive half, again, not great. We only managed 18 for the match. 19.5 is our season average. 18 isn't going to get it done. They scored 36 and a bit above the season average that we've given up, which is 33.2. But 36 isn't great. I think Crows were something like 70 or 65 or something in that measure. Might be exaggerating that. But 18, we just couldn't move it from our back half in the way. Well, what I would say is that we were moving it okay, actually. We just couldn't take advantage of them without kick inside 50. We were terrible going inside 50. Ugly was much easier to find than good, that is for sure. And they just took way too many easy marks inside 50, taking the 6th most forward 50 marks any team has taken this season. So they are 6th most forward marks inside their 50 of any team this season. We conceded 30. This was really strange stat. Melbourne, we conceded 38. We have conceded 38.3 points per game in the first 10 minutes of quarters, ranked 18th, unsurprisingly. And in this game, that trend continued. We conceded 36 points in the first 10 minutes of quarters tonight. And so I hadn't seen that stat really put us, it's been putting us all season so far right on the back foot, right from the get-go each quarter. And then, that's what happened in that third quarter. I really thought the game, we were going to get blown away in that second quarter. And again, sort of early in that third. So to fight back was a real positive until the last quarter. This one was really, to me, the ugliest of all of the stats. Our last quarter pressure rating was 136. 136. Like, that is not even, that's barely registering pressure. It's 29 less than the Cats. We'll talk about it a bit later in the question about fitness, but in a game where it's still live at three-quarter time, you come out and you can only muster a pressure rating of 136. That's just nuts. My long-term bugbear keeps on coming up. It just does my head in. I don't know. It's just it's got to be the most frustrating thing I can't think of anything more frustrating is our kicking efficiency. It's only 65.8. Beautiful night for footy. Didn't even seem particularly dewy on the ground. Theirs was, I think that's like 71 or 72 is the average. There was 74.4. We just our kicking has been terrible for a long time, and it was a poor again. This was another I mentioned before, 17 marks inside 50, down 12. So we could only manage 5 marks inside 50. I reckon, 5 mark. Van Ruin must have dropped, I don't know, Andy, what do you reckon? He must have dropped about 6 marks that otherwise he would normally take.
Many chest marks and just, I don't know, not even the ones where he was just a bit out of position. There were actual ones he dropped like a hot potato.
Oh, totally. There were ones where he actually did all the work to get the player out of position and then still drop. I don't know. His confidence has just completely collapsed. And so that's what I mean by actually our movement wasn't too bad, and some of our kicking inside 50 actually wasn't too bad. It was just that our forwards just couldn't mark the ball. And same with Melksham. He dropped a couple of marks where, it was like, what's going on, fellas? Turner too, but I thought actually, despite that player ratings, I thought Turner had a much better game than Van Ruin for a range of reasons. But one of which was he dropped a mark where it was just lazy forward crafted, where he had position. He needed to, he just took it too easy and allowed the guy to spoil it. It was just so frustrating. This was probably outside the 136 pressure rating in the last quarter. I've noted this before. It was really interesting watching the Suns Crows game, a super entertaining game of footy. Frustrating for me, I had a bet on the total match point, which is a line which was 181. So if Rankin had got that free kick, which he should have got, I would have won the bet because it ended up being a score of 181. But it was really interesting watching Hardwick's coaching in that game, and it's very much what we're trying to do. He plays a style like he's the hybrid of what he brought with Richmond. He's brought forward, but with that fast ball movement, but it's still all about the contest. It's all about the attack on the opposition player. And so for him, right through his career, he's the most important stat. Hardwick's always said this is post-clearance contested possessions. So contested possessions after the clearances been won. We were down 22 for that stat for this match. They killed us. Cats absolutely killed us. And that's almost the game right there. So we could only manage 70 post-clearance contested possessions. They got 92. That is just bananas. And so, that's a real problem. It doesn't matter, like all the talk about us trying to re-look at a new game plan, as I've said a number of times, is that it doesn't matter what game plan, fundamental contest and pressure and tackling and intensity is still absolutely critical. It's still fundamental to the game, and all the best teams, the Cats are number one for pressure. The Suns are number 2 or something for pressure. I think the Cats are number 1 for tackling. I said something about the tackling stats before, some crazy number. That was the question last week. Someone asked about tackling. And my frustration about them not giving up, not supplying the information, the AFL sort of holding information. So interestingly, this was in the on the AFL thread. Geelong's tackle efficiency in that game was 76%. They've recorded a tackle efficiency of 70.3 this season, ranked number 1. So that's measured by ability to effectively stop the opponent, so they can't give off the ball. 76%, they're ranked number 1. Again, it didn't say where we were, but I'd be guessing that, the number of broken tackles, we would have struggled to get 55, 60%. So their tackle efficiency was off the charts in that match. So that was super frustrating. Almost as frustrating as this. So this was so up to the curious stat. This is really curious. I was, again, just so frustrated by the umpiring. And again, it's not a factor really it's not a factor in the loss. But the inconsistency just drives my head in. It's just so frustrating. This stat was bizarre though. Post clearance, frees 4. They got 19 frees post clearance to our 7. They were plus 12 for post clearance frees. like that is a nuts statistic. I think we ended up being 5 or 6 down for the match or something. But they just, when they won a clearance, if they weren't winning the post clearance contested possession, they were getting a free. That's one of the stats, by the way. That frees are one of the ways you can get possession. So contested possession. So I thought that was a curious stat. Just statistically not a great game. And I thought the other interesting thing was the player ratings. A lot of players really playing well under their career averages. Viney being a very notable example of that.
I think the other really, really damning statistic for me, which lines up with everything you've just been saying, Ben Man, was in the last quarter, we had 3 tackles in total for the whole team. For the whole team.
Yeah.
There was just no pressure. They just waltzed it out, did what they want. They were playing keepings off. That's fine because it's difficult to tackle when you're playing keepings off. But
unless you press up,
unless you the old adage that in the under 15s, man up.
Get up in the grill. But I don't think we had the gas in that. But that is damning, George. 3
for the whole team
compared to Atkins. Right.
Yeah.
Atkins had 11 by himself. 11 tackles he made himself. Again, it goes to that pressure, and for all the talk about game plans and method, and doesn't matter if you're not bringing that intensity to AFL footy, you are just simply not winning games. And it was kind of more depressing after Friday night because at least it's out of the way in a way. But then watching some of the other teams, even Freo yesterday, I don't know if you watched any of that game, George. Their intensity, and so's the Dogs' intensity, was terrific. Even the Saints' intensity against Port, it was like, come on, that's our DNA. It's our one wood, and it's like we've left it at the pro shop and it's being retooled or something. So it's and again, we'll talk about it a bit later with that question with fitness, but it's really hard not to come to that conclusion that something's gone haywire with a high performance program.
Oops, I was on mute. While we were talking, we had a lot of issues. While Big Man was talking, had a lot of issues with our stream, which I think I've fixed now. Anyway, so if you we were getting a lot of echo and but it seems to be fixed now. But all right, well, let's move on to our questions. And the first one has to do with Geelong's ball movement as opposed to ours. And, we'll start with that because it's perhaps the most glaring difference between the way the two teams played on the weekend. Demon Jack 14 writes, "Hi, guys. Really appreciate the podcast, the analysis and thoughtful discussion. Help us all make sense of where the club is at. Why did Geelong seem to move the ball so much more easily from their backline during slow play compared to us? We often had to resort to kicking down the line under pressure while they found space and moved it with far more composure. Even if it didn't always result in scores for them, it was noticeable. Is that the result of poor defensive pressure from us or just superior kicking and decision-making from them? And on our end, was our stagnant ball movement due to our lack of run to create options or a shortage of players willing or able to take more aggressive, risky kicks to open up the ground? Probably a mix of both. I know the new game plan will take time, but if we don't improve in this area and recruit accordingly, we'll struggle to contend in the next few years. Also, did Goodwin allowing Geelong to have a spare in defence, Henry and Stewart, contribute to their ease of movement and our struggles? The number of uncontested marks we conceded was brutal. Surely that comes down to coaching. We did look a bit better when we could chain handballs off slow play and generate some run, but those moments were too few." Murdoch 16 writes, "If you rewatch the game or even just the highlights, it's striking how much more Geelong players move to create options for the kicker compared to us. You simply can't play keepings off like we tried in earlier rounds without meaningful movement to provide options for the kicker." Adam the God says, "It looks like we've already shifted away from the short, uncontested possession game that worked so well in round one and reverted back to the old long down the line approach. Have the coaches lost confidence in the new method already? Are we playing to minimise damage instead of committing to developing the new game plan?" BW511 adds, "An interesting takeaway from Goody's post-match presser. He said we went to Geelong aiming to take away some of their game. The backlash over the uncontested marks will roll on all week, and rightly so. If there's one team you can't afford to give the ball to freely, it's Geelong. Has a coaching group ever misread things so bad tactically? George, what do you make of the tactics that we took into the game, and why were the Cats so much better at moving the ball than we are?
Firstly, there's a lot of things to unpack here, and I agree with a lot of the points that were raised by all our contributors tonight. I think a lot of clubs this season have been caught out by the change in the way the game has evolved. It was all previously about fast that got Collingwood a premiership a couple of years ago, move it quickly from the half-back line by whatever means. And I think the coaches overall have developed far more stronger defensive structures. People can't move it as quickly as they used to. There's been the change in the approach to the stand rule that I've talked about before. And there's only a couple of clubs that are doing something different. And I think, unfortunately, us included, practiced the fast ball movement all over summer. And then come the actual game, when you've got genuine opposition on the field, they've run into brick walls. So there was a comment from one of the coaches after one of the games. I can't remember which one. It was either St Kilda Port or the Suns Adelaide. I just can't remember which coach said it. He said something along the lines of, "You can't depend on fast movement alone anymore. Everything is, the game's now a combination, and you take your chances of what presents in front of you. So you've got to be able to execute the fast movement type. You've got to be able to go slow. You've got to pick it through the defence, and you've got to kick it long. But it just depends on the circumstances. If we go back to the basketball analogies, it's no use playing fast break all the time. It's not going to get you. The better teams use combinations of that depending on the game and where it stands and who you've got on the field. We've been doubly disadvantaged in this area because we haven't got all that many fast players to play that sort of game, which is, I suspect, what we were practicing essentially over summer. And the few fast players we have, like the McVees and the Rivers, and not Rivers so much because he's actually been playing, but Lindsay and those people and Windsor that we were depending on being our fast ball movers off the half-back line have been injured and not available. So basically the game plan that I think we were planning all summer has fallen flat on its face, and I don't think there was any more so an example of it is in this game. Geelong, on the other hand, have actually, I think, reverted to something they were using 4 years ago, which was a lot of the zigzagging across the ground. They don't, when they switch the ball, they switch back into the centre. They don't switch to get onto the skinny side of the ground or the fat side. I can never remember which one's which. But previously, you swing it across the other side of the ground where there were less players. Well, teams, like I said, have got far more better defensive structures, and you'll see teams who try to do that suddenly discover there's no one to kick it to down the other side. So Geelong use this zigzag pattern. It's the same. Footscray, the Bulldogs use something very similar, where they'll swing it across. They'll even swing it from one side of the ground to the other, but it comes straight back into the middle again. And then they go out to the side again, and then they come back into the middle. So it was interesting to see them do that. Fundamentally, as we'll talk about later, in order to Geelong moved it beautifully, freely. We were playing some sort of zone, but players weren't applying pressure with the zone. They were just leaving holes, people standing still, and that just enabled Geelong just to find the next target, and then the next target, and then the next target. It's not surprising that they had so many offensive opportunities up forward when it was coming all the length of the ground so often that Bin Man's stats have shown. The other thing, so we've I think defaulted to something that we know, which was the old, as was mentioned by one of our contributors, kick it down the line as the default option, and that worked fine 4 years ago when you had Max who was marking everything, and we had Ben Brown who was moving up the ground and taking marks, and we even had T-Mac in the forward line providing that link. Well, at the moment, all we've got, effectively is Max, and I'm afraid Max is a little bit older than he used to be, and he's certainly not taking as many marks around the ground as what he used to. So we haven't got that as as a real outlet for us to be able to move the ball. So, yeah, I don't think we're in a good place. Geelong, all credit to them, they set out with a game plan which they executed beautifully, and they achieved it beautifully. I still think they're a middle of the road side, and if they try to do that sort of game plan coming into finals, it will fail again. They were successful in 2022, because they changed that game plan to something that was higher pressure but also faster movement. But times have moved, and I'm afraid I don't think we've moved as much as what we need to.
I don't think the Cats, though, that's the first time they've played that way this year. And as Gary Lyon, I actually thought the commentary wasn't too bad on Fox. And Gary Lyon made the point that was actually a function, that really high uncontested mark was a function of the tactics that Goody employed of, who did Sparrow go to? Holmes, and bringing him out of the forward line and not replacing him. And also the fact, as you said, we were giving them those marks. We weren't pressing up on them. So they've not played that way this year, but you're right, George. I think that's a really a good point. It's a good sort of observation about the way the game's looking at the moment. I think when people hear transition, they think of exactly like you said, of Collingwood's model in 2022 and 23 of that frenetic run from the back half where, it just goes up really quickly and they bring up the ball in waves, and to a lesser extent, Hawthorn similarly. But I think that teams I think that's a really good way to describe it, that sort of combination now. That's what Brisbane did, and they've done that brilliantly for the last couple of years. And I forget who the question, one of the questions where it says, is it Murdoch, about the leading up, is that, I'm just trying to see who it is, but that's exactly right. You need to provide lots and lots of options particularly when you're moving it down the ground. And Brisbane have been brilliant at that for the last couple of years. And I think there's a combination at the moment of the Brisbane style of hitting up those lead up targets and keeping possession, and then going when you can go. But going when you can go requires that 3 or 4 kicks in the side that can hit a target that's high risk. And at one point, Langford kicked one from the half-back flank diagonally into the centre corridor, which was exactly the template that, you're talking about, that, suddenly pull the trigger, hold the ball for a while, pull the trigger, and we didn't score on that play. We absolutely should have. It's worth noting, though, in terms of the tactics for that game, is it's so narrow, that ground. So you can't spread, in the way that obviously you can at the MCG. But again, even the Suns and Crows, for all of their ballistic nature, they're also playing that hold and chip it around until an option provides itself. So I think that's a really good observation. That transition footy isn't all about speed on the ball. It's speed on the ball when it's time to go. And the best teams hit that target and then all go forward. I think, the big struggle for us, I don't know about Adam the God, I don't think we did sort of revert really to down the line. I just think that we went into that game to minimise the loss and maybe sort of eke out a win, which is not a great sign really in some respects. They're doing it round 4. But I guess it speaks to the pressure of getting a win somehow. It just feels to me one of our big issues, a lot of talk about the forward line, is defensively. We're all at sea defensively. Exactly like you said, the players were standing around. It wasn't clear. It looked like they weren't clear where they needed to be within that grid, and coming off such a clearly defined defensive system for, 4 or 5 years, half of that team have played under. We just looked a little lost at times. And then, the dreaded finger pointing, don't you hate it when you see your footy team start pointing at their teammates as if to say, who's over there, who's manning him? I think that's a really good point. And, we definitely struggle with the players to hit that target. But it's also an excellent point that you need players constantly leading up to create the targets, including people who never get the ball. You need 4 or 5 people who are offering those targets, which is obviously very, aerobically challenging. It's interesting, George, also the other thing about that fastball movement, when you do see a game, so part of the Port Adelaide St Kilda game, sometimes you get games now that only low scoring but fast movement, and they bounce from the half-back line to the opposition's half-forward line and go back, and almost the game's played in between the two arcs, but quickly it just goes back and goes forward. And there's quite a number of those games that are being played. So, yeah, I think that's a really good observation about that, the way the game sort of evolved. It's still about transitioning it from the back half, but just doesn't necessarily have to be at breakneck speed.
Oops, mute again. Okay, let's move on. Big Gun writes, curious to hear your thoughts on what our forward line should look like next week. I think there are a few different ways we could go. Fritsch and Melksham haven't shown much so far, but at their best, they're a real handful. JVR looks like he needs a confidence reset at Casey, a step back to move forward. Turner is clearly struggling with the pace of AFL, but there's something there. Fullerton's in good form and deserves a shot. Jeffo should be available and absolutely warrants a crack. I also like AJ's aggression, another viable option. We really need to start rewarding form at Casey, even with some doubts. Fullerton should get his chance. He can't do any worse. Out-of-the-box options like May or even Campbell up forward might be worth a look. Neither are natural key forwards, but we're undersized and could use a bigger body to straighten us up. Campbell would also give Max a much-needed chop-out. At this rate, he'll be cooked by mid-season. I've left out T-Mac and Petty. We've been down that road. Time to move forward. And leave it to Diva writes, is there anything we can do to fix our forward line? Across 4 games this year, we haven't kicked more than 11 goals, and in 3 of them, we didn't even hit double digits. Some teams have individual players doing that on their own. Have we genuinely explored every option, left no stone unturned? Now that our backline is under pressure, we need to be kicking 7 or 8 more goals just to stay in games. Yes, injuries and poor form are a part of it, but surely there's something more we can try. Murdoch16 writes, if I'm remembering correctly, last year we had a ruck coach with the forwards, a midfield coach with the mids, and a defensive coach with the backs. This year it's a defensive coach with the forwards, a rookie coaching the mids, and another defensive coach with the defenders. In my opinion, it's crazy that we don't have a proper forwards coach. Listening to champion forwards from past eras talk about the struggles our players are facing individually, it's hard to put all the blame on the players themselves. Would love to hear your thoughts. B-Man, we've said it for weeks. It's incredibly frustrating. We've been dealing with the same forward line issues for a couple of years now. In recent seasons, despite that media criticism, we still have managed to kick winning scores or at least generate scoring opportunities from our entries to be in that position to win. This year, though, the inside 50s, they're still there, but the quality looks at goals just have really dropped off. How can we fix it?
Well, it's funny because for this match, like I've been for all through that period where we've had struggles with our forward line, for me, it's almost always been about the delivery inside 50. It's not been about the personnel up forward. That it felt different for me on Friday night because I actually thought we got some legitimate one-on-ones, and that's what it's all about is beating the flood back. You move the ball, whether you start slow from your back half and chip it around. At some point, you go quick and you get behind the opposition's ability to set up their defense and create one-on-ones with your key forwards. And I thought we did that really well, actually, at times. And it wasn't just JVR. Turner had some really good one-on-one looks. So did Cozzy. So did Melksham. Fritter as well had a couple of good one-on-one opportunities. There seemed to be off space. There were times where we had opportunities to lead into space. Cozzy did it a couple of times. Fritter took ones. There were some examples of really poor kicks, poor options. Like Fritter did a couple of things where it was just nuts, the choice that he made. But it was, for me, the first time in a long time, really, for me, it was about the forward line as much as anything. So I pushed back on that idea of criticising JVR and the forward and Paddy last year and being more about the sort of the supply in. But it was, I don't know what's happened with JVR. I've been pumping him up for the last 2 or 3 years, but he seems to have, he's lost all confidence, and I'm not sure what he's a good lead up forward. Generally, I've thought he seems to want to get into a wrestle all the time, but he's losing those wrestles, and his hands are concrete. He's not grabbing them, So I'm not sure what to do with him. Taking him back to the ones. To the Magoos, is that the right thing long term? Do you play your players through, and would you do, Andy, in that circumstance?
It's one of those things that you don't know whether it's going to destroy his confidence, but you can't, mollycoddle if he's not earning his spot. Well,
yeah, and look,
but what do you do? We need to win.
This is where I wrote on Demonland is this notion. I thought, well, it's even that we talked to last week. I think it was David from Adelaide who called in. That horns of the dilemma we're on is, we've got to be looking for the future now. And so he is the future. And so what's best for his development is almost the best question. And maybe it is to go back to Casey and get into confidence and bring Jefferson in, for instance. So it was actually not the delivery in this match. It was some of our forward craft was woeful. And I don't know, George, like me, you're a massive JVR fan. And what's your take on where he's at?
I'm not sure what's going on with him. He certainly, particularly in this game, was playing a long way from behind, which you just can't do when you've got a Tom Stewart or a Jack Henry playing in and around you. There's just not that opportunity. But playing behind, for some reason, once again he was back in the ruck again. That doesn't do him any favours whatsoever. But I'm less critical would be less critical of JVR in this game as the rest of the small forwards.
I have to say I wasn't super impressed with Cos. He seemed a bit lackadaisical and didn't, maybe that's being unfair.
It wasn't just him. After all the talk during the week, the forwards had one tackle in the first quarter. One.
Yeah.
Sorry, zero. It was zero in the first quarter in the inside 50.
Enough, is it?
And Fritter and Cos and Melcham
Henderson.
and then Henderson and then Spargo in the last. You've got to do more than that, because the other option is, apart from the fast movement into the forward line when you get the one-on-ones, there's a lot more of kicking it into about the halfway, the old traditional, halfway, but the hot spot. There's a lot more of that, which nobody takes a contested mark in that situation. No. You depend on the small forwards to, successfully crumb or be in the contest, and they're just not.
And we're not trapping it in. That's a really good point.
And it's going out the other end.
And we're getting killed on exactly that play at the other end. It's the Stengels and those mediums, and even Dangerfield. He's not a medium. You know what I mean? We're not trapping it in or getting anything happening at our end, and we're getting killed at the other end on exactly that play, which is why I reckon Adam the God has put on Demonland for ages now. And I'm totally on board with it now. Is Viney go forward, put him in the forward line and be a pressure forward, because he's not performing in the middle. He's slow, and we need pace back through the centre.
Yeah, but the trouble with Viney is he is slow. And
but that's less of an issue up forward. If him being a wrecking ball at exactly that contest you're talking about, the ball hitting the hot spot, hitting the ground, he's the sort of player that you need in and under, and we're just not providing that sort of pressure.
Well, it's certainly not. It's not coming from the people who are currently sitting there, and that's a real contrast with even where we were 2 years ago, let alone back in the premiership year. Where you just didn't get it out of our 50. It stayed in there until we scored.
I think that's an excellent point. And it's also a real contrast to the Cats and all the best teams. Yep. They're manic. When the ball hits the deck inside their 50, they're manic. And we're just not manic at the moment, which is a real worry. And so in terms of that question about the forward line, I'd hate to see JVR get dropped, but I couldn't believe he was our 5th rated player, and I'm talking about him getting dropped. So there's a big knock on the player rating scale. Will Jefferson come back in? That will be really interesting. I thought Fritter, I've been knocking him for the last couple of weeks. I would have dropped him this week, to be honest. And so I think he was lucky to get picked and get selected. it'd be interesting to see. I thought he played all right. He had a better game. His effort was better. He missed his shot when he's our best kick. He can't seem to kick at the moment, and he also made a couple of inexplicably poor decisions going inside 50, where he had much better options, and again went for the higher risk, lower percentage option. And but I thought his effort was better. Andy, what did you think of Fritters?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit better. It was when he was playing a bit further up the ground. But then again, those missed shots.
Yeah, he really hasn't been the same since he had that foot injury last year.
No, he's lost a little bit. So, and again, the other one was Melksham. Melksham had a pretty vanilla game. There was a couple of times where, put one hand up for the mark. Come on, you've got to be taking them. And, there were a couple of frustrating kicks where we just kicked it too long, where we had them a one-on-one opportunity and we just fluffed their lines. And what's his name? The other thing about watching, I'll tell you just while I think about it, the the Crows-Suns game, it just was reinforced how much we miss Nibbler. He was terrific in that game. He's end-to-end running, he's tackling, and I really think we've missed his leadership. Exactly what you were talking about before, George, about the pointing and where people are standing. Nibbler's the sort of player who get in there, he's running, and as much as I was hopeful Sharp might be, he might be a good sort of replacement, he's no Nibbler.
Well, we did have a question today that didn't make it into the podcast just because for time. Go Lord, he said, how many of the thousands of Nibbler critics are wishing he was still a demon high half forward? Come on, own up. Well, I'll put my hand up. We don't need to ask Bin Man because he's the president of the fan club. Still is. It sounds like it.
Myself that we wouldn't miss him.
Well, bring him back.
And the important thing we're not going to talk about trading and things like that, but what did we get in replacement for him?
Sharp. We got Blunt. We got Blunty.
Looked great in that North Melbourne game, but so did the rest of the team in that practice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right, we'll move on. We did have a couple of callers, but they were calling up to tell us that the stream was cactus, but we've fixed that now. I would like to try out this new number that we've got. So if you do want to call in and have something to say, give us a call. We'll get you on the air. Simon Goodwin. All right, this is the conversation that has to be had. Pipefitter writes, the season is starting to feel a lot like Danaher's last. After being outrun by Freo in a final, he had the team slim down to become more of a running side, but we lost our contested edge and completely fell apart. Neil ended up falling on his sword. Goodwin can see where the game is heading, but our list is built for a different style, and it's just not working. The writing's on the wall. It's hard not to feel like this will be his final year as coach. Roosted Far adds, my biggest concern that while I believe we're a better side than we're showing, I just don't think this group will ever truly master the current game style, and I can't see us winning a flag playing this way, which begs the question, where are we? To win premierships, you either need to be the best of the dominant game plan like we were in 2021, or you need to be developing a strategy to counter it while recruiting players who fit that model like Hawthorn did so well. That's a 2 to 5 year rebuild unless you catch lightning in a bottle like Collingwood did in 23. And that puts Goodwin's future in serious question. I don't believe he has the list or the plan to win a flag within his current contract, and I can't see him coaching beyond this year. If we're serious about flags above all else, then he's become surplus to requirements. And that's harsh, and I like the guy, but liking him won't win our next premiership. A new coach might. So do we rip the Band-Aid off now or quietly start the search in the background and let him finish the season? I'm not usually for sacking a coach mid-year, but sometimes it becomes necessary. I like how Sydney managed their transition, but I'm not sure we've got the right assistant ready to take the reins. Though, to be fair, I wouldn't really know. And we do have a voicemail from Beth, and I will just play that now. Let me get the sound up.
Hi guys, it's Beth. Love the pod. I really appreciate the honesty, insight and passion that you all bring each week. It really helps me keep sane through the highs and lows, and right now it's definitely one of the lowest of lows. And I just wanted to pose a question, and it's a tough one, but I think it needs to be asked. how long do you think Simon Goodwin has before the club has to realistically consider pulling the pin? And let me be clear, and I say this with full respect to Goody. He delivered us something that we waited a lifetime for. 2021, it will be forever etched in our hearts, and we owe him a debt that can never truly be repaid. But footy is brutal. It moves fast, and premiership windows don't stay open forever. Right now, we just look lost. We're unsure of our identity. We're stuck between game plans and fielding a side that doesn't seem built for the direction that we're trying to head in. It feels like we're treading water. We're slowly drifting further from the pack. Our players look confused and they don't seem to be playing for each other or for the coach. Has Goody lost the playing group? Are they just not good enough? So I guess my question is, at what point does the club make the painful but necessary call to move in a new direction? Do we ride out the season and make a change with dignity, or do we just pull the pin now? Perhaps it's too soon. I'm not saying sack the coach tomorrow, but I do think that we have to start having the conversation, because if we're serious about winning another flag, we can't afford to get stuck in the past, no matter how glorious it was. Guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for all the hard work that you do.
So, George, we're only 4 rounds in, and there's a lot of footy to be played this season. But at what point does the conversation about the coach's future become real? It started on Demonland, to be honest, and to be fair, those talks of whether Goody was the right guy has been even around before the flag. And right now we're 0-4, and the next month presents some very winnable games. It feels like a make or break stretch, not just for the team, but for Goody as well. And if things don't turn around soon, can you see the club making the tough call and moving to part ways with Goody?
Firstly, thanks to Beth and thanks to all the other contributors towards this segment. In terms of timing, I don't think I'm telling everybody something they don't already know. You'll know when he's in real trouble when the president or the captain comes out and says we're well and truly behind him.
At the next day.
And based
he's got full confidence of the board.
That's it. Yeah, you've heard it before. Which means I noted on this evening's Channel 9 News, Sam Walsh had come out and was backing Michael Voss. So, Bin Man, you better get your money on the first coach to go this year.
Yeah, always bet that one.
But I think Carlton will win the next 2 anyway. But if they do lose they've got West Coast and North. If they do lose those 2, I think they will win them and win them easily. He'll be gone. There's They're ruthless, those supporters. They're ready for him to go now. If they lose those 2, he's gone. But I think they'll
get the money out. Right.
But Goody, that's Voss, and we're more. We have our heads screwed on better than Carlton support.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I can't say that with a straight face.
Secondly, I agree with what the listeners have posited as well, Roosted Far as well. We've talked about other areas, different lists for different times, for different tactics. We've got an ageing list, despite what some people might think. Our backline's held together by a couple of 34-year-olds at the moment, I think, and our ruckman's a similar sort of age. It takes years to replace that quality. Does it suit the current game style? Whatever the current game style is, well, the results aren't showing that. It's putting more and more pressure on the coach, and unfortunately, everybody blames the coach. But you can't
sack all the players.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's the dilemma that's faced by every club. You've got to sack the coach because that's only one person. You can't get rid of half your team, although that's usually the problem as a general rule. I wouldn't be doing it, quite honestly, because I don't think we've got any backup plan whatsoever. I mentioned last week that I think people underestimate the loss of Uze to us as far as a tactician. In this game, there was some obvious areas that we've talked about that just didn't get responded to on game day. Previous to Uze, we had Jennings in the coach's box as well, who is, by all reports, a superior tactician. I don't think that there's sufficient support coming through for Goody. Different coaches have got different skills, be they man managers or in people who are capable of invigorating the players to do things that they wouldn't normally do. But you also need the smarts up there to observe what the opposition are doing and how you react to it and things like that. Nathan Jones, again, being a hero of the club and a true stalwart and icon. I don't know what his coaching experience was before he turned up, but I don't think he had any. It's you've got to surround yourself with the right people.
He was just
well.
a Channel 7 expert commentator, which is pretty low bar.
Yeah, but these are the people who are sitting in the box at the moment. We haven't got the Uzes, we haven't got the Jennings. I don't know about the capabilities of Chaplin and the others there. Unfortunately, if you keep losing for any coach, there is only one solution, and no matter how much you like him and review him for bringing the first premiership in 51 years, I remember a comment that was made to me by a former president of, Premier of the state, who was a Mad Essendon supporter, and he was commenting when they first appointed James Hird. He said, "Unfortunately, at some stage, you've got to kill Bambi."
It's 57 years, by the way.
Yeah.
Beth, in the words of Kiss from their song, Beth, you say you feel so empty that our house just ain't a home. And I can see what you're saying about Goody, and I can also see Rooster's comments. The bottom line is, George is spot on, is that you can't have too many more losses before there's always going to be questions at a coach. 0-4 is obviously not where we wanted to be. It's just, even the talk about it going back to the Neil days gives me heebie-jeebies thinking of that period. But I think Andy's point's an important one. It's still early in the season, so let's not play that game of, collectively not play the game of, whack-a-mole and let's, sort of hunt down and look for signs of Goody's demise. What I will say, though, a couple of things, is that some concerning things for me in this game was some of the body language and of the senior players. And
we've got that coming up soon, but
so that was a worry. And when you start getting the confusion, I think Adam the God's comment's an interesting one about, well, what about why I thought we were going to back this new way of playing in, and then so they choose not to down, to minimise the loss, to maybe eke out a win, whatever your way you want to frame it. It doesn't send a great, powerful signal that we're a team that's going to be pushing for the 8. It sends, the opposite. The other thing I would make a comment, though, on is, just as a general thing, and I think this is the challenge for Goody, is will be the second time he's implemented a new way of playing. So the first time he did it, he brought in players specifically for this game plan. Now, he's done that through the draft this time, bringing in Windsor, bringing in Lindsay, less so Langford, because he's not really that sort of fast outside player with, elite kicking skills, for instance. They've tried, but, that's what Mitchell did at Hawthorn. When you come in new, you get one crack at it, and he got rid of a lot of players and brought in players who he knew was going to play the game plan that he wanted to do. Goodwin did almost exactly the same thing. He got rid of Frosty, he got rid of T-Mac, he got rid of players that weren't going to be able to implement the zone defence that he wanted to implement, brought in Lever, brought in May specifically for that, and went from what was a high-octane, very fast, from the back half, high-scoring, exciting game plan in 2017 and 2018. Remember, we were the ants pants. Everyone loved the way Melbourne were playing in 2018. We were the Hawthorn back then, and we thrashed the Hawks at the MCG. We thrashed the Cats with that model, playing super exciting football. He realised that I wasn't going to win a flag, that model, and retooled and got rid of players. Watsy was the other player that he moved on. I still think we should have kept him. But so he got rid of a lot of players, brought in players who could play that model. The question I would have is, can you do that a second time? All credit has to go to Cats, whatever you think. the Cats and Scott, you've got to give them a lot of credit for their ability to rebuild and retweak on the run. Their 22 flag was a masterclass of that. That's what Goody's talked about before, wanting to implement the same thing as the Swans have done. But it's got to be a huge challenge to retool a game plan that, took 3, 4, 5 years to build, to do a second time in your coaching career. And I think the other thing is history does show, that not too many coaches coach beyond 10 years at a single club, do they?
No, they don't. All right, well, let's talk about the leaders. Supreme Demon writes, I know we can only speculate from the outside, but what's really going on with the playing group? There's something off with the mindset of key players like Bailey Fritsch, Clayton Oliver and Christian Petrarca. Petrarca's reaction after the siren, throwing his mouthguard to the ground, spoke volumes. He's clearly angry and frustrated, but who's that frustration directed at? His teammates, the coaching staff, or himself? Both he and Clary are approaching 200 games for the club, an incredible milestone, but it's hard not to wonder, will they both still be at Melbourne in 2026 and beyond? And then there's the bigger question, who's actually taking responsibility for where we're at right now? Is it the coaches, the players, or should it be a shared load? Simon Goodwin will no doubt be feeling the heat as the losses pile up, and that comes with the job. The buck does stop with the coach, but what about the leadership group, the senior players? There was so much talk about love at the start of the season, but what about accountability, selflessness, and putting the team first? D in a kilt adds, Goody, Max, and others have been using the word love a lot lately, and I can understand why. When Clary was at his lowest, Max opened up his home to Clary, even with his wife just home from hospital with their newborn. That's love. Others at the club have gone above and beyond in similar ways, and none of us can fully grasp what Track and his wife and family went through after his traumatic spleen injury. In the wake of something so raw and frightening, the love and support from the club, the coach and the teammates would have been vital in helping him get back on his feet. Even Cozzy, who clearly misses home, stays because of the people and the love he feels at the club. But love, by its nature, requires more than just words. Without actions that match, trust begins to erode. And once that happens, it's hard to rebuild. Goody called for a response after the North game. It was absence in the early moments against Gold Coast. We saw a glimpse of it against Geelong. But if love is the foundation, shouldn't the response be stronger, more united, more fierce? So what's the truth here? Has Goody lost the group's trust? And if not, where's the response that shows he hasn't? By the way, love what you guys do, Andy, Binman and George. Keep it up. So Binman, we're not mind readers. We can't truly know what's going inside the players' heads. The frustration is obvious. We saw it from Max last week after the game and again from Track as the siren sounded. And if the losses keep piling up, that frustration's only going to grow, and I worry it's already starting to affect the performances on the field, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. The more frustrated they get, the worse we play. The worse we play, the more frustrated they become, and so on and so forth. What's going on?
Look, I have no sort of interest particularly in the gossip and inside clubs, and I have no connections inside the club, so what I hear is what's on Demonland. So I've got no intel or no, understanding of what goes on behind, at Clubland. And as I say, it doesn't particularly interest me. But what I would say is, just from an external observing point of view, there was some sort of body language that I wasn't thrilled with in that Cats game. I don't mind Track at all getting angry afterwards, but what was interesting is what happened right before that. Like he got burned. Someone didn't pass to him across, and I think it might have even been Clary, who went long instead of going into the centre. We had options. He was frustrated through the game. He was a fantastic performer, by far our standout player in terms of his contribution. But there were some other things, like there was some more, not so much the body language, but there were several examples where players didn't give to another player, where I hate that. And Track was one of them. He cost us a goal when it was down in front of the Cats goal, and he collected, and instead of doing the obvious thing, the commentators pointed it out in the call, or at least they did on Fox, is Tom McDonald was there to give the handball off to. And that's where, when that transition from the back half, when you do get it going quickly, is that's the handball release, and you get it going with that next kick. Tom McDonald hits the target in the centre and you're away to the races. But he rolled back the other way, didn't give the handball, and got done holding the ball, or I forget exactly what happened next. There were a number of those things where Clary burnt Viney. There was those sorts of things where it was sort of, I think that comment by Beth's a good one about being caught between two game plans and not sure. So maybe there's a bit of that, but there seemed to be a bit of that sort of all round angst towards each other. And it's, I wonder whether there's a little bit about, maybe part of the thinking from someone, and it wasn't handled well, was with Clary, for instance, last year, really, if you're hard-nosed about it, last year was the time to get rid of Clary. Last year was the time to get rid of Track and trade them out and go bring in the players who you think are going to have the skill set to play the way you think that the game's going. That's exactly what Mitchell did and got slammed for it because I can't remember, but there were a couple of senior players he let go and
Gunston.
There were a couple, 2 or 3.
Hodge previous to that.
Yeah. And he was slammed for it, and he was criticised because, the orthodoxy was you can't build a whole bunch of pups around. You need those senior players. But he was clear on what he wanted to do. As I said, Goody was too when he did similar. He axed Watsy, he axed, Frost, Omac. I'm sure that Bates probably not him, but there were other players as well who, that he got rid of and brought in other players to play that style. And I wonder whether that's all in the mix. I also wonder, to be honest, and this is purely speculation, is whether the whole thing around Joel Smith, that's all come to a head in recent times. It's been in the news. That would have caused some unrest. Like, he had good connections. He's a well-loved player. They're human, aren't they? They're a bunch of young men. That would have caused some. There's no question that would have caused stress, and we won't know from looking from the outside how much stress. But your comment last week, Andy, and about I think it was you mentioned this, but Goody's reaction to the question that he was asked about Smith coming back to the AFL. Did you see that?
Yeah,
the question had barely been finished before Goody said, "Well, yeah, obviously not to us.
He's not coming back here.
Yeah.
He's not coming back here." Which, look, Goody's not the best media, thingo, but one of the things I like about Goody is it's hard. He finds it hard to cover I reckon, what you see, like he wears his heart on his sleeve. And there was something in that, the way he said that. There was something angsty about that. He's not coming back to the Dees. He said it in a way of, that's obvious, isn't it? I mean, I figure, well, why is that obvious? I reckon Joel Smith was dealt really, really harshly with, it's ridiculous. Just totally ridiculous how he was treated by WADA and the AFL. I really dislike it, but there's no question that would have caused some ruptures within the club and within the playing group. And, footy's often, you get older players and younger players. Maybe the younger players, maybe that's something to do with JVR's form. I don't know. Who knows? So it's really hard looking from the outside and, who knows?
The difficult thing when we're in the circumstances that we find ourselves at the moment, having lost 14 of the last 19 games, is that your good players stop playing the team game. They go, I might as well, Max, the examples of Max that have been given, I might as well go and try and kick the goal because nobody else is going to do it. Track's the way he's been playing, I might as well take it on because nobody else is doing the team thing. So, that just represents and that's what good players try to do. They try to lift the team and get them over the line. But if they're seeing others around them get away with blue murder, not performing, not putting in, then they will continue to do that, and that's not going to lead to success by any stretch of the imagination. You're probably right, Ben Man, that if there's a time to get rid of some of your better players, get rid of them now.
Yeah, or Clary. The other thing is that, even Maxie's dropped off. I mean, Track had a great game on the weekend, but, from your senior players, it's not just about the body language and all of those things. You want them playing really good footy when you're struggling. Viney's barely, he's had the worst start to his season for ages, hasn't he? Frida, he's one of our senior players, has been poor. Steve May has been variable. He was really good on the weekend, so full credit to him. The one that I would say of the senior players I've got so much respect for, and I just love the way he goes about his footy. He's been one of our best players this season which probably says something, to be honest, without backhanded compliment to him, is Tommy Mack.
Absolutely.
Again, he was one of our best players. Again, he went for the kicks. Again, he's the one who trying those kicks to the corridor. He's not great one-on-one, but he was wholehearted through that whole match. And, my respect for Tommy Mack has gone, it's gone up to another level. You could not drop him, but it's probably not a great sign that he's one of our best players at the moment. That's not a knock on Tommy Mack, but he isn't our quickest player, is he? So
yeah, well, Tom 2 years ago at the start of the season said, "Oh, this is probably going to be my last year."
Yeah.
And you're right. That Tom Mack is one of our better players. A player who thought he was almost at the end of his career is now holding the back line together and playing well while he's holding the back line together.
And doing what a senior player should be doing, showing leadership and not dropping his standards, not doing chucking, a hissy fit. And the other one I have to say is Clary's a bit of a worry in terms of his lack of pace from the midfield. Bloody Dangerfield ran away from him on the weekend. So, again, he was one of our better players. His pressure rating was really quite impressive, actually. But he is slow. He was never super quick, and he's slow now. So he's got to be surrounded by, it's great to have Cos back, but you've got to have quicker players in the midfield to offset how slow Clary is. And I was thinking about what you might do with our forward. Maybe something radical like moving Clary forward and saying, you're going to be a permanent forward. I know he's never been impressive up forward, but that's where his relative slowness could be hidden a little bit. Same with Viney.
Well, let's talk about some fitness. CD writes, is fitness one of the major issues with this group? We consistently fail to man up when teams transition from their defensive 50. I lost count of how many times Geelong had players 20 metres clear, even inside their forward 50. In contrast, when we've got the ball, there's very little hard running. No one seems willing to create separation for themselves or open up space for teammates. Our forwards often look like defenders playing out of position. There's no creativity in their leading patterns. Most of the times they just want to wrestle or nudge their opponents under the ball. It feels like an easy way out. To me, a number of players simply don't look AFL level fit, and that might explain our dismal fourth quarter performances so far this season. And Lazy responds, I'd really like to know the answer to that as well. We're getting smashed in uncontested possessions and marks, even on smaller grounds. Is that a fitness and work rate issue, or is it structural? There's been a lot of focus on our problems with the ball, but are we just as poor without it right now? We used to have a well-drilled defensive zone. Has that been tinkered with too much alongside changes to our ball movement? Dina Kilt says, let's talk about Melbourne's high-performance manager and strength and conditioning coach, Selwyn Griffith. Selwyn took over from Darren Burgess after the 2021 premiership. Back then, Dees fans went into every fourth quarter full of confidence, knowing no team was tougher physically or mentally. Burgess preached that physical toughness delivers mental toughness, and that final third of the grand final was living proof. But lately, it feels like just the opposite. At the end of the last season, George consistently raised concerns about our fitness and inability to run out fourth quarters. In hindsight, he was spot on. Despite the club's much-heralded thorough post-season review, the first 4 rounds this season feel like a continuation of last season, unable to run out quarters or games. We've seen signs of this before. After both the 2022 and 2023 season, those brilliant Demonland training reports noted how many players look shot by season's end. In 2023, we lost both finals by under a goal. Fresh legs might have made all the difference. Just imagine if we had managed our loads the way Geelong has done so successfully for years. The 2023 flag was there for the taking. When does our fitness regime come under scrutiny? So, George, there's a couple of excellent points there, and a lot of our frustration comes from the fact that we haven't been able to capitalise on the momentum of the 2021 flag. One of the defining traits of that season was our ability to outlast and outrun opponents. We finished games stronger than anyone. Since then, we haven't come close to hitting that same level of fitness, and now it feels like we're running on the spot in concrete boots. And among all the issues we're facing, this one is just so critical to get right, and sadly there's no quick fix once the season started.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was one of the posters on Demonland this week, I can't remember who it was, said currently we have grilled written on the front of our jumper. It should actually be cooked. So which unfortunately has a lot of truth about it. It's pretty evident that we're pretty well in concrete boots by the final quarter. But what was really disappointing was we were no better in the first quarter in this particular game. We were just so far off what was going on around us, and that has been the case certainly for the whole of this season. So I just don't cut, and I don't understand what's going on, and unfortunately we don't, because nobody really knows outside the club what's going on in terms of the fitness and conditioning staff, because we just don't get any information on that. We don't have the GPS tracking data. We don't see what other clubs have got, certainly. We can only go on what we see with our eyes, and the bit of information that comes back in comparisons with other clubs. I was impressed with Geelong this week, for example, the way that they managed their players. Not a single Geelong player played 100% of the game. Players like Stewart, for example, who was a mainstay in their defence, played 80%, whereas we have Stephen May and T-Mac playing 100% of the game. They're managing these players. Dangerfield is the classic example. Comes on for short 5-7 minute spells and absolutely rips the game apart in those spells, but he only managed 71% game time for the whole game. So that's how you manage your players and how you make them appear to be fit and running on top of the ground, as opposed to keeping people on for longer periods than perhaps they should. I don't know what was going on with the interchanges. If we're not all that fit, we only use 70 out of the 75 interchanges. Surely you'd make full advantage of everything that's available to you, and we didn't this week. So again, I don't know what's going on in terms of the interchanges. We had a lot of players with really low numbers. Sharp 59%, Windsor 64%, Langford 63%. Not unexpected for the younger ones. You don't want to burn them out, but
Sharp's not young; he's 23.
That's a good point. But it's a distribution of the workloads that's unequal. And like I said, Geelong seem to be very impressive of the way they manage, particularly their older players, and we've got a good number of them. But when you see, as I've mentioned before, we had 3 tackles for the whole team in the last quarter, 0 tackles inside 50 in the first quarter. There's something that's not quite right in the way that the players not only are not applying the pressure that's needed in an AFL game, but are they actually capable of applying the pressure? And that's the real concern.
Yeah, I mean, it's great actually that there's a conversation and it's sort of seeping out into the media as well. There's much more conversation and talk about high performance programs and fitness this year, which is good. My short version is that I don't think we are fit enough. It's like, if it quacks, it's a duck. Yeah, and some of the data, George is right. It's hard to find specific data. I've been talking about the tracker is a good one. And so again, we were 3 of the top 5 players for defensive running, which is when the opposition when the opponent has the ball. We're Cats players. We're almost always, when we are in 21, 22, 23, we almost always had 4 or 5 of those were Melbourne players. There was some data someone put up on Deemerland. There's a thread about our fitness on Deemerland at the moment. It's pretty damning data. Our quarter to 1 to 3 pressure rating, we're 15th in the AFL in the fourth quarter. Contested possession, we go from 10th in quarters 1 to 3 to 17th in 14th. Inside 50s, we go from 9th in the AFL. This is after the weekend's game. Quarter 1 to 3, 9th in the AFL. We're 18th in inside 50s in quarter 4. Point differential, quarters 1 to 3, 14th on the table, so not the worst, and we're near the bottom of the ladder. So minus 57 points. For the fourth quarter, we're 18th, minus 102 points. And there's a bunch of other similar data that demonstrates just how steep the drop-off is. And again, as I said, we could only apply 136 in pressure ratings in that last quarter. It was nuts. Say this next bit about, of course, effort's sort of a mental thing and pushing through the pain barrier and all of that. But I really do question whether they're fit enough, and I just don't think they are. I think that definitely questions need to be asked of the high performance program. So just a disclaimer here, but this next comment I totally acknowledge. This is pure wish casting and could reasonably construed as giving players an out, but it's more a thought bubble. Is there a possibility that we're not in optimal shape, but is there a likelihood that that's by design? By that, I mean the orthodoxy for the last sort of decade has been teams are in their optimal shape come round one, and then their condition diminishes until the mid-season bye when they fill up the tank, so to speak. But I wonder if the increasing aerobic demands mean that high-performance programs are being adjusted at the moment, that the game's changing and some teams are trialling different approaches. So the Hawks and Lions both started really slow last year. Lions were 0-3, the Hawks were 0-5. In the Lions' case, there was heaps of commentary about how slow they looked, about their ageing stars, them being too slow. But both the Hawks and the Lions were arguably the two clubs in best physical condition come final. So it's a long bow, I know, and for the sake of argument, if true, it would just be a stupid move anyway. But is there any sort of chance that this, we're trialing a different model, given that we fell away so badly in the back half of last season? After remembering what were we after 5-6 rounds? We were 5-1, 4-2 last year.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so and then we completely fell away in the back half. So that's what I'm hanging my hat on a little bit. If that's the case, I would have rather we fall away in the back half of the season. So pure wish casting, I know, but we do have some recent history to the Lions last year. If you go back and look at some of the press match and the coverage of the presses, there was lots of commentary about how old they look and how slow they looked, and question marks about not being able to back up from the flag the previous year and playing in the impact of a shortened pre-season and all of that. And similarly, the Hawks were chipping around and keeping off teams and weren't in the condition. Both teams were in much better condition at the end of the season than the beginning of the season. So I'm hoping that's the case.
Okay. Well, because you've just been talking positives here amongst all the doom and gloom, we did have a few people who wrote to us with some positives from the match. Radish D says, obviously a lot of problems from the game, but there were some real positives to take away. Langford looked promising in just his second full AFL game. Turner had some good moments and Chin was outstanding, easily our most consistent performer right now. McDonald also put in a solid effort. Most encouragingly, I feel like we're finally starting to see the game plan take shape. Does the panel agree? The Ox says, call me naive, but I actually feel almost positive after last night. Given the dire position we're in, with missed opportunities, questionable umpiring, out-of-form players and an unsettled side, at least we had a dip. We showed some fight. Maybe our expectations, both as a club and as fans, were out of whack. But now it's about steady progress. There are still some quality players to come back into the team, and if we keep building, who knows? Just keep going, and that goes for you guys too. Demon WA says, probably delusional, but we could go on a 4-game streak and be even for the Hawks game. Bombers, middle-of-the-road team. Freo, underperforming under the weight of expectations. Tigers, surely. Eagles, please, for the love of God. Andy, can you get on board with this? No, I cannot. John Demonic replies, I think we'll be, what are we, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 8. 8. John Demonic replies, this is the optimism I can get behind. An oft-repeated hope that I can cling to when looking at the ladder over the years is we're only 1 or 2 wins outside the top 2, 4, 8. And guess what? We're only 2 wins outside of the 8 right now. It's salvageable. I'll leave the doom and gloom exclusively to the 2 hours spent watching us kick into the forward line. Well, that was slightly optimistic. Big man, let's hear some positives so that I can pull back my veil of negativity.
Well, so I think we're definitely aiming to have a long run fitness-wise come final. So the back end of our season is going to be our peak. And just sort of some further evidence to support that wish-casting idea is that the Swans they won their first 10 games, completely ran out of puff come grand final day. The Cats won their first 7 games, completely fell away come finals. Well, not completely. They did. One made a
10
grand
points
final.
outside of a grand final.
They incrementally fell off. If we win the next 4, Bob's your uncle. We're going into the bye 50-50 and all bets are back on. So yeah, I can get on board with that. Essendon this week, every journey starts with a first step. We've had a few. The other positive thing I would think is that I was pumping up in the pre-season the redemption story, that this has got all the makings of a classic redemption narrative and arc. And now that I think about it, is in fact it's even better now because we're further back. And, any redemption we do get will be much more powerful. So the script writers out there must have thought, hold on. We need to start 0-4, not 0-5 script writers. We need to start 0-4 because that will make the redemption narrative arc just that much more powerful. A good chance for a Netflix series next year if we can pull it off.
Well, someone better find a sword like Excalibur or find out they've got Jedi powers or get invited to Hogwarts and find out there is some wizard because we're going to need some supernatural powers, I think, to get our season back on track.
Or we need some Beskar. There was a horse running on the weekend called Beskar. It was out of Sword of Light, and I thought it was a very well-named horse.
George, any positive?
Beskar is the medal that the Mandalorian wears.
Right. I think the one positive that we can take out of this game was the continued form of Langford. This kid is absolute A grade in the making. He is.
And his goal was he summed that up so quickly, and it took the right option straight away. Yeah, he
did what he needed to do, and he knows how to do it. Yeah, he's absolutely A grade. Yeah, but for the rest of it,
so's Lindsay, so's Cos. Colt, I saw today, Ghost Rider from training today. Colt looks fit and raring to go. She said back, but presumably, she means the VFL. We need our best players. We simply, particularly with this method, as I said last week, is that we need, if we were to take out your top 5 players out of this team to play this method, it would be Lindsay. Now we got Windsor back; he'd be one of them. McVee. I don't know how far away McVee is, Andy.
Couldn't be too far. It was like 2 weeks last week.
Still 2 weeks, I think.
Colt. And who am I missing? I'm missing someone else who's obviously Lever Hurts. Doesn't sound like he's coming back either.
2 months. 2 months
surgery on the ankle.
That's something to look forward to. So really, to get those players playing together, Lindsay, McVee, Windsor, Colt, and Langford, when they all play together, that's going to be something really, really exciting to watch. And there's that question before is a really interesting one about the senior players. That starts to be in clubs a dynamic, doesn't it? Growing up, the senior players got to go with the younger players, or there becomes that schism. And again, it's a day for praising teams that I hate, but. You got to hand it to the Pies the way they've managed that dynamic and their ability to knit together older group of players and with younger players coming through.
But to go back to our questioners, one of them wanted, who was it? Demon WA wants to be called delusional. Well, we can do that. And the Ox wants to be called naive, and we can do that as well.
Well, we aim to please here, so... Yeah.
All right,
we've been in worse places. Like what?
I just can't remember.
Yeah, it's a flesh wound.
It's not that we've been in worse places. It's what stings for me is that we were up the top. We were thinking dynasty, or we were trying to solve that by the media, and it just didn't come. And the cliff came so much quicker than I thought it would. And I'm not even at that Wile E. Coyote part of coming off the cliff. I'm falling.
Yeah.
But in reality,
we're at almost at the bottom.
Are
of the cliff,
a fantastic team. Look, leaving the Saints, the Roos, that was a shocker. In that to lose that game, obviously, but the Giants are top 4 team. Everything tells me about. I am super impressed with the Suns. They are a top 4 team. Cats are a top 4 team. So the reality is, if you think we're a middle of the road team that's nearing the cliff, Well, we've played 3 top 4 teams, and so no surprise that we've lost those 3 games. Of course, the Roos games is an outlier in them, but let's be a little bit objective about it.
The other thing that stings me hard is that Essendon have our first pick. So if we do finish bottom or second bottom, we don't even get the benefit of finishing bottom. Yeah. Sometimes I used to think, all right, we'll finish bottom, we'll get the number 1 draft pick, but that's not a possibility this year. All right, let's talk about Casey. The Casey Demons put on a promising performance against Geelong at GMHBA Stadium, but ultimately fell short, losing by 16 points in a high-scoring encounter. A strong start and a dominant second quarter saw Casey take control, largely thanks to an outstanding 5-goal performance from Tom Fullerton, who also collected 19 disposals and 8 marks in his best game for the club. Casey held the lead into the third quarter with solid contributions from Will Varell, 28 hitouts and a goal, debutant Mitch Hardy, 26 disposals, and Aidan Johnson, Jack Billings and Noah Uze hit the scoreboard as well. Defensively, Paddy Cross and Kynan Brown, a game-high 11 tackles, impressed with their pressure efforts. And despite their early dominance, Casey struggled to maintain structure as Geelong lifted their intensity in the second half, capitalising on turnovers and surging to the lead in the final term. While Kai Windsor gave the Dees a late spark, it wasn't enough to halt the Cats' momentum. Encouraging signs came from young players like Blake Howes, Oliver Seston and Jed Adams, while injuries to ruck Tom Campbell remain a concern. The Demons now turn their focus to a tough round 4 clash against the Giants at home. And yes, it was a win for the ages, asks. Who else can come into our side from the AFL-listed players? Sestons, Adams, Mentha. Just bring them in if they're performing at a decent level in the VFL. Need to find out if they can take the next step. So, George, did you watch? Yes, George watched. Yes, nodding. You watched? Yeah. Briefly give us some insights how the Demon listed players fared and perhaps answer, yes, it was a win for the ages, questions about the cavalry from Casey swooping in to save the day.
Look, this was a really, really interesting game. It's a great game of footy to watch. Basically, were 2 evenly matched sides, I thought, and just the way the setups were being played, I was really impressed. And it goes to Geelong's depth. What we saw in the seniors game was replicated in the VFL game as well. They are really, really well drilled about what they do. One of the things I did notice was if the ball's in attack, they set up a ring around about 10 metres around from where the ball's being bounced, for example. That gives them room to manoeuvre for the ball to come out and obviously gives you better goal-kicking opportunities. But in defence, that ring closes into 5 metres just to stop the ball coming out for the opposition. And that just tells me this is a really well-drilled side and it's drilled right down to the lower levels. Fullerton played an interesting game, really, really interesting. I haven't seen him play as well as this at Casey in the past. He does some misses some easy shots at times and drops marks, but he finished up with 5 goals. Now, what really impressed me about this game was he was working up the ground. I spoke about this before when it's something that's been lacking in the senior side, that intercept mark up on the wing where the big man goes.
We've really missed that, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely missed it. Now, if he's this is the first time I've seen him doing it. If he's doing that at Casey, that's exactly what we need in the forward line at the moment. I think he's a little bit thin to be for the AFL level. I think he'll get pushed around a little bit, but hey, given where our forward line sits at the moment, I'd certainly be looking at giving him a run this week. The other one that really impressed me, and it took me a while to work out who in the hell it was Cully. He's changed his hairstyle from when I saw him at training pre-season. This is a guy who's got really good. He moves fast. He knows where to go. He's got really smart footballer IQ. He's a good kick. He was playing in the mid, and he's got good pace. And you sort of go, that's absolutely everything that we need.
And he's hard at it. I was really impressed with something. He created a goal where he really wanted the ball, created a spillage, and it was just off the back of his want for that contest.
Yeah. The other thing that impressed me was...
Bring him in straight away. Bring him in.
The other thing that impressed me was his off-the-ball work. Centre bounce I saw where he didn't get the ball, but he absolutely bolted up, to either take a receive further up or to provide the options up forward line. Now that's a guy who really tells you that he knows how to play football and what to do. So
He's a lefty too. Is it a left footer? Am I imagining that?
I can't remember. Sorry.
But my reflection was some pretty neat kick as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very, very neat kick. So, he's got everything that we sort of need at the moment. The other one that I thought might be really worthwhile, given our current circumstances in the forward line, is Mentha. Now, he does a few things now and then, which look really impressive, but given how little we're getting out of people like Melcham, for example, and if we're looking at for the future. Melcham did nothing for us on the weekend, and his Mentha doing the occasional thing that really looks good. We need a small forward. Maybe it's time to take a bit of a chance there. But certainly, Cully stood out. Adams was doing well, but he's all alone in defence because we don't have any other defenders down there. Marty Hoare's out injured at the moment from the senior side. Seston is interesting. Great kick when he gets a kick under no pressure, but then he disappears for whole segments of the game. It's sort of disappointing because the opportunity's there if he was to put in a little bit more. AJ does some great stuff again, not to be unexpected, given that he was playing at Werribee last year. Does some great things. He's really aggressive at the ball and the man, which is probably one of the things we do need. Varel finished up doing a lot of the rucking because Campbell went off at half time. And
with a real flow.
Yeah, and from the report on Demonland, he's got a hamstring. That affected the game considerably.
Massive.
Because he's a big body and he was moving nicely forward and being really challenging. Varel's, they're trying to find a role for him almost in the, in terms of his future. He's just that little bit too short for a ruckman, even though he's 200 centimetres. For the AFL level, he's building up his body nicely.
Yeah.
Can he play a bit of back? Can he play a bit of forward? Maybe. So really, he's really a development prospect, the same as Adams. Didn't despite all the numbers for Kine and Brown, just doesn't do enough around the ground. Just doesn't get involved. It doesn't impact the game. More importantly, it was interesting. A great game to watch. Cully, I was really impressed with. Particularly, I think this was his first game back with Casey. He was off for 10 minutes. In the first quarter, then he was off for 15 and then on for 10. So he's only doing very limited minutes, but he was very impressive in those couple of minutes that he was on the ground. But really, I think Fullerton's almost a definite that could come in for the forward line. I think we've been talking about Fritsch. Do we keep him? When you've got people pressing from below who are kicking 5 goals in a game and doing the running up the ground that we want and providing the links, then at some stage you've got to bite the bullet.
I thought he was excellent, George, and he was really good last week, but he really I thought he was terrific in this game. And he could have kicked. I think he missed a couple of early ones as well.
He could have kicked 8 easily.
Yeah, so he had a fantastic game. I thought that was the best game I've seen Varel play, and he wasn't great in it, but I think it was really good that he got an extended run in the ruck. Bad for a team and the reason why he did, but I thought he was okay. But definitely both on the scoreboard, but as you say, his work rate and some of his smarts I thought was much better with Fullerton. He ran to the right spots, and I thought Seston was pretty good. I take your point about him disappearing, but they're trialling him at half-back flank, and so it's a new position for him. He's always been a half-forward, sort of medium-forward, sort of on-ball type. He looks in much better shape. He looks in much closer AFL condition, and his kicking, he hit a beautiful kick into the corridor, which I thought that's the sort, a guy could run onto it through the middle without breaking stride, and that's what we really lack, that damaging kick. The other play, though, I have to say, I don't know, maybe I'm getting a set against him. I'm not sure, but I was really disappointed with Laurie. Now his numbers were okay, but there were a couple of, unlike Cully, there were a couple of instances where he just needed to, in the old-fashioned speak, he needed to go. It was his turn to go, and he didn't. And I don't mean it's crazy putting his head over, into a contest or going backwards and getting hurt unnecessarily. I mean, there were a couple 50-50 balls where the opponent wanted it more, and Julie got the ball, and twice it cost us a goal, one from the transition all the other way up the other end, and another time was in the Cats forward line. Whereas Cully, there was an example, as I said before, where his want for the ball created an opportunity that created a goal, and it just to me stood out really clearly. So I think Laurie's now he was drafted in the same year as Bowie, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was
Yes,
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought you're right. Fullerton was excellent, and the other player that it's amazing that he's not on an AFL list. It's Bonner, isn't it? Is it? Bonner?
Well, he was, yeah, but
Well, yeah, I know he was,
Yeah.
but like in terms
Yeah.
of this year, I thought he was a standout, and some of his ability to create space and deliver the ball cleverly makes me really wonder how he didn't end up getting on a list, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to bring him in as a mid-season rookie.
Yeah, he certainly would be, and he's. It's very strange that he was dropped, but and he's been the same in every Casey game this season. He really uses the ball well.
Hasn't he? Two other thoughts about the game, just from the players' point of view, is AJ effort was great, but I hate to say it, but he looked like a VFL player playing back at VFL level, which is what he's looked at AFL level. The other one that disappointed me, I have to say, is Howes. He's I've got a lot of time for him. They've tried to make him a halfback flank. He might, he is quick, but he sort of mixes some good bits of play with some inexplicable bits of play, and you really want that sort of player to go back and dominate, and you want to be able to thinking, God, he's a cut above VFL level, and it just didn't feel like that. Nor did Adams particularly, but Adams is more of a project player, I guess. But yeah, Fullerton, I think, fully deserves a call-up, I reckon, on that performance. I don't think Mentha, he just didn't get enough of the ball, but does some clever things. I'll grant that. I'm not sure what his tackle numbers were like, but he don't know that he's going to solve our pressure inside 50 problem.
All right, let's talk changes. So if you have a look, injury list was released today. We got the unfortunate news that Jake Lever's going to be having surgery on his ankle. He's out for 8 weeks,
What?
which isn't great. That's
You're
what
kidding.
they said.
No,
Having ankle surgery. Did you not know that?
Oh,
Did I just drop a bombshell on you?
He did just drop a bombshell on me.
Oh,
What?
geez, I
8
should have,
weeks?
8 weeks.
Should have had a spoiler alert or something. Tom Campbell also, he injured himself, did his hamstring, 2 to 3 weeks. Judd McVie still a week away, according to the injury list. Matt Jefferson and Xavier Lindsay are both listed as tests from a hand and knee injuries. And the good news is it says Colton Tolstrup is available, which is good to hear as well. So based on that, Dice writes, and I think you guys have poo-pooed this already in your assessment of the Casey game. Dice writes, simple solution to beating Essendon this weekend, win the tackle count. We're yet to win the tackle count this season, 0-4. Need to be more ferocious. Bring in 2 guys from Casey leading the tackle count. Kynan Brown, 28 tackles from 3 games. Bailey Laurie, 18 tackles from 3 games. And Tom Fullerton finally deserves a go as well. Come on, Demons. Big man, followed by George. Who comes in, who goes out for the upcoming match against the Bombers in Gather Round at Adelaide Oval? Don't get into your preview yet. Just
out. And then I'm just reeling from that news about Levy. You're kidding. That takes him past the half the mid-season bye.
Yep.
That's a shocker. Who comes in? The other thing that's really disappointing is Tom Campbell's injury, because I've come around. Max isn't right. He needs a chop out. And I'd almost be in his thing where, okay, like Campbell was so impressive in that first half, wasn't he, George? He looks he looks a cut above VFL level. Amazing he hasn't been able to get more senior games at AFL level. He looks he looked fit, and I was even thinking watching it, geez, I could see him coming in and playing a role. I think they're pretty committed to Jefferson, so I think he'll come in. Conan Brown, that's a good call, on his tackling. I'd take George's point about he doesn't hurt much. He hasn't got much X factor, but his tackling, we do need that sort of pressure, so maybe he can come into the forward line. I think they want Jefferson in. So, it'll be a big question about whether they bring Fullerton in. He could come in and provide that chop out, so JVR doesn't. Who comes out then? Maybe Melksham comes out. It'd be interesting seeing what they do with Spargo. So I'm Fullerton in, Jefferson in. I don't know whether they can both come in together at the same time. So I was, again, just going back to the Cats game, I thought it was a strange decision to have Spargo on the as the sub. That was another strange sub call, I reckon. Why not use his running power in the first three quarters and bring him off and bring an impact player on? But look, I'm a bit flummoxed in terms of the Lieber news, but I'd like to see Fullerton come in just because you've got to reward that sort of performance. It was a really fantastic performance, and maybe give Jefferson some time back at VFL level.
We've got a couple of difficult questions. Is, given that Campbell's not available, who does the second ruck? And the answer seems to fall to either JVR, or do you bring Fullerton in, who hasn't been playing the ruck in recent times down at Casey? Varell's been doing it as the backup at Casey. Sharp and Spargo, you'd have to question their roles. And Melcham as well, and that's why I'm seeing an option for a small, nippy forward type. And I've said Menth is someone who could possibly do that, because we're not seeing much from those three in the seniors at the moment. So a bit difficult. Jefferson, hand injury, I would think, give him a bit more time down at Casey, but that depends on, you don't want to be using Jefferson in the ruck, for example. So I think JVR stays in the side. Fullerton comes in. It's really, really difficult. The places where we need more people, we haven't got people, and the places at the moment, essentially the full forward role, is where we've got 3 candidates or even 4 candidates for the same position.
So a bit of deck chairs on the Titanic is what you're saying.
Yeah.
If that's how you want to frame it, Andy, you need some practice reframing things. Opportunities for improvement. There's numerous this week at the mighty Dees.
Let's get into the preview. It is the second time in 3 years that the Demons will face the Bombers on neutral territory of Adelaide Oval in the gather round. The last time the Bombers took the bickies as their forwards went to town on our undermanned Dees backline. And coming off the bye, the Bombers have lost their first 2 games for the season against finals hopefuls Hawthorn and Crows, but notched up their first win of the season against Port before they had the bye. Both teams will be desperate for the win lest their season ledgers get further in the red. The Bombers have the extra incentive, as I mentioned before, they hold the Demons' first pick in this year's draft. So, it's an 8-point game for their number 1 draft pick that they're going to get this year. How's that for positivity? George, followed by Bimman, how do you see the game playing out? And can we get our first win of the season? And stick it up me for that comment I just made.
Again, it's a difficult situation. Both teams are in very similar positions with similar sorts of skills across the field. The unfortunate thing is, from our perspective, Draper's playing really good football at the moment in the ruck role. A couple of their senior players are really putting in, and they're at the very best, a mid sort of ladder side. I really don't know what to make of this match. I don't think we're complete by any stretch. Missing Lever will cause huge factors for us again. I don't know that we've got the running power to match theirs, particularly in the middle. So, yeah, it's going to be a difficult match all round for us. It really could go either way, unsurprisingly.
The Bombers' season kicking efficiency so far is below ours, 63.1%. We're
This could be
lofty 65.6. So look for this game to be a battle of the scores from turnover. That's my prediction. The team that concedes the least scores from turnover will win that game. The Bombers are they are trying to play that sort of high octane transition, but they're doing what George was saying. Like, it's funny to frame it like the old style of transition. They want to run fast from the back half and create the overlap with handballs, but they haven't been controlling the ball as well as some of the other teams. But their defensive system is woeful, and I have to say ours is not much better at the moment. But they're getting exposed on turnover. This could be a battle of who turns over the least this game. I've watched a couple of their games. There's they've got turnover merchants just like us. I'll steal this gag from someone, put it on a chat that I'm in, that Tony Mockbell didn't miss a single Essendon final victory during his 18-year prison sentence. So it's probably a bit, maybe I should make that gag next week after we win, but we love the Adelaide Oval. Are
we playing at the Adelaide Oval?
We're playing at the Adelaide Oval, yep.
Next year we're going to be playing out at one of the country ones.
Norwood or
Gambia.
Channel 7's thrilled. It's not Channel 7 because it's a Saturday night game, isn't it? So, it could well be a match of who's. Did you say Lindsay's? He's not ready, is he?
It said test, so
Test. Well, I'd put him straight back in. So if I missed that before, he has to come back in, because really it is becoming so critical about it, not turning the ball over, and it may simply be decided in who turns it over least. And so we've got I'd be tempted to pick Seston for that reason, because he can hit a target. So can Laurie, I guess. So, but yeah, I'd be bringing Lindsay back in for that reason. That's for sure.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there for tonight. And we'll be back next week to break down a gather-round game against the Bombers. If you want to listen to the show live as it happens, and please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. And thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Juv McD. Thank you to our voicemailer, Beth. And as always, your questions and comments are integral to the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Demon Jack 14, Murdoch 16, Adam the God, BW 511, Big Gun, Leave It to Diva, Pipe Fitter, Roosted Far, Supreme Demon, D in a Kilt, CD, Lazy, Radish D, The Ox, Demon WA, John Demonic. Yes, it was a win for the ages, Dice. And apologies to the following people who had to cut out some of the questions and comments. Otherwise, we would have been here all night. Phil C, Go Lordy. Actually, we got God Lordy's in. Tom Dyson, Hatchman, El Diablo 14, Ross Milan, D Old Fart, Doug Reamer, Track Forever, Glintosaurus, D Positive, and Buck Naked. We'll try to get your questions in next time. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and B-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you a shout out on the next show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.